Hello, everyone. This is Boom.
And I'm Spice, and this is a very special edition of Boom and Spice Book Advice because this is the first episode of our series covering short stories. And this episode will feature two authors of very different time periods, but of very similar styles in Anton Chekhov and Raymond Carver. Anton Chekhov was a Russian, I believe, from the 19th century. And he, just like Carver, wrote a very slice of life, mundane setting. That's where he set his stories. And very little happens in their stories. But what shines through are character moments and ways you can relate them to your personal life, in my opinion at least. Raymond Carver was a contemporary American short story author and poet who was very prolific in his short time as a popular figure. He got sober, I believe, in the 70s or 80s, and that's when he wrote his best stuff. And he's got a mountain of great literature. I've got 6 of his books on my shelf at home. And the one I have right now, the collection that I pulled this from, is entitled Where I'm Calling From, but it's a longer anthology. I believe everything stuck to him was from originally what we talk about when we talk about love, which, depending on where you ask, is the most popular collection of Raymond Carver stories. And the story we are discussing today is entitled Everything Stuck to Him. And boom, this being the thing I picked out, this is the Spice curated section. Please give me your thoughts first on Everything Stuck to Him.
All right. Yeah, this was good. This was a good one. I wasn't sure what we were getting. I'm not a big. I haven't done a lot of short story reading, so I was interested to see. And I totally agree with you with both of these. How very little, relatively, is going on, but you can pull a lot of meaning from it. I think Carver does a really great job with symbolism and a lot of imagery, but pretty good. It took me a second getting into it, just a couple rereads, just to kind of place myself. But a lot of good stuff. It's talking about this guy, described as the boy and the girl, telling his daughter a story about when she was a kid. And let me think a minute here. I've been thinking about it all weekend, and now I can't
Take your time.
say it. But yeah, he describes himself as themselves as boy and girl throughout the whole story, never man and woman, because he's describing two people who I guess are struggling, or who don't have their identity yet. They're two young kids.
Yeah, they're people
deciding to start a life together. And a kid comes by, and he makes sure to mention that it's during the same time waterfowl season is coming, that the kid's arriving.
Yep.
So it's almost like he's at a crossway here.
An impasse.
Becoming a father and being with his family, or going with this guy to go out hunting, and then it all boils down to this night where being a dad is kind of hard for him. He's starting to see that being a parent is gonna be struggles dealing with this crying baby, pleasing his wife, and then whereas going hunting with this guy, that's a fun plan, going out and doing this stuff. So he's starting to question what he wants to be, if he's ready to be this husband father figure, or if he still wants to be this hunter sportsman. And it ends up being they go through some fighting. His wife kind of throws this ultimatum out of anger, like, "This, you're going to have to decide. I mean, are you going to be this hunter, or are you going to be with us? Are you going to be in this family?" And ultimately, he goes up there, and as he's clearing the ice off of his window, which I liked, as the window becomes clear, so does his mind. And he decides to stay in there with his family. He's eating his breakfast. It falls on him. Everything's sticking to him in his underwear. And as he sheds his clothes for, his hunting clothes, he puts away this hunter unsure about whether he wants a family and sticks with his family. So it was nice. And then later, then you get back to the present, and he's with his daughter, and he's going to take him to town. So obviously, this decision he made, he's stuck with. It doesn't mention his wife at the end, so I'm not. I guess it's kind of open whether she's there or not.
But at the very least, he did not abandon the daughter.
Yep.
They could be split, but he's still in her life.
Yep.
Yeah.
He made a conviction, and he's with it.
And it's
so very, I like it.
And I'm glad you picked up on the symbolism there, because I feel like when short stories are discussed, people try to take them at face value. But Raymond Carver and Chekhov pack their stories full of character moments, themes, and symbolism that could be found in a wider novel, long-form piece. But in this case, it's so packed in there that you have no choice but to sit and stew on it for a moment.
Absolutely.
Or else you're going to miss something.
Yep, and that's what it took, like I mentioned, the first read-through. You're like, okay. And I guess that's how it is with how it was with our next one, too. Yep. It's just the nature of the beast with the short stories. Read through it, and then going in to find what you're trying to get from it.
If anyone listening to this podcast goes to read these short stories, as you should, because they're free online, I made certain of that.
Yep.
I wouldn't make Boom read a short story that he has to buy. I'd feel real bad about it. It's very, comparing these two short stories, everything stuck to them. You could get a lot from with a skim, but you wouldn't get everything. With The Witch by Anton Chekhov, you need to sit there and think about it, because there's a lot that you need to take in. Where it's a story about a guy and his wife who work at a church. It's a position that no longer exists, at least in America, called a sexton, who's not a priest, but lives on the grounds and does maintenance. Like in Hamlet, like the guy who's digging the grave, he could be referred to as a sexton because he's not a priest, but he helps tend the grounds. And the way the guy got the job was his wife, his current wife's father, dies. And on his deathbed, he's like, I need someone to take up my position, take care of my daughter. And in haste, they choose this bum. This guy who's a bit of a dweeb and nags his wife, and he's just a generally unlikable person. And then there's a bit of an impasse that the reader comes to, where you need to decide whether or not this is supernatural or if this is literal. And it's up to you. But if you read it in the literal, non-supernatural sense, then the woman, whenever there is a snowstorm and people come to their church, which makes sense because it's Russia, inclement weather, they go to a place that's popular and a place that definitely has people there. Whenever they come, it's always a strapping young man, and the sexton has the inkling that his wife is cheating on him with these men. So if you take it in the literal sense, it's just happenstance, serendipity that these young men are always the people who come. Mm-hmm. And then she happens to get with them. Or if you go from a more supernatural angle, then she is the one beckoning the storm. And she is the one bringing about these young men to the church, like a siren bringing these men to the rocks. And then she cheats on her husband with them. That's the angle that the husband goes with. And I don't think that's the case. I think she just gets good luck with men who are transporting goods and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not a completely unreasonable thing to assume that the men who are out in this weather delivering things and doing this manual labor are gonna be fit young men.
Exactly. They're not driving cars.
Probably gonna be a run-of-the-mill customer there is a young guy who's fit.
Yeah, these aren't people in cars. They're like soldiers, people transporting goods, and they've got horses. These aren't in like wagons, these or carriages. These aren't, like Boom or I driving around in a car that's insulated and protects you from the elements. So that makes total sense. And there's this really neat moment where the person who's driving the carriage that stopped at the church and the wife are alone for a moment, and they lock eyes. I forget whether they actually do anything real physical, but you can tell for a moment there that whether or not it happens often or if it happens at all, there's a carrot or a little nugget of truth to what the husband is talking about. And I think that's an important moment in the short story.
Yeah, they have a moment where the husband is out helping the other guy get their stuff ready to go again. They had their nap, they're loading back up, and they have a little thing where they lock eyes. Mm-hmm. I think he touched her neck and said, like,
something
some
sensual, but
quite
nothing cheating.
Yeah, and then as they're about to maybe go further, they come back in. He drops his hands and is gone.
I love that moment, and if I were to stage this piece, that would be the centerpiece, is that moment. Because I feel like it would be easy for someone to take that moment and make it deliberate, make it very obvious what's going on. But in this case, it's so subtle and there's so much nuance. It's how it might happen in real life. Because no one just grabs someone around the waist and just, kisses them relentlessly.
Yeah.
It starts with something subtle, and it doesn't always go somewhere. And it makes you think, would she have done it? Does she do that often? Who's right? And Chekhov never gives you an answer. And that is the beauty of this piece. It doesn't give you everything. And in the Carver piece, they give you enough, especially with the framing device, for you to guess and fill in the blanks.
Have a fairly reasonable gathering what he gives you and make a solid assumption.
Yeah.
And this one, it's you can gather a lot of things. I mean, she's trapped in a relationship she doesn't want. She has to be in it.
Yeah, she's
fed up, wants to leave, but that's not really an option. I mean, it's her dad's thing.
It's a marriage of convenience rather than a marriage out of luxury or actual love.
But they give you that moment of like real longing, and you can see it and feel it real strong, and that's it.
It's
you don't
beautiful.
know if it's just that's just one time.
It's kind
overcoming, or this is something that happens.
And the theme surrounding it is reminiscent of, or at the very least, the feeling you're left with is reminiscent of a short story that we will certainly cover in a future episode, entitled "Why Don't You Dance" by Raymond Carver. It's been adapted in several forms, and I won't get into the meat and potatoes of it, for future posterity. But at the end, there's a feeling between a young couple who's now aged, that they're growing apart, like an old man they'd met before who was selling, in his garage sale, quite a few items that symbolized, him moving on from a marriage. And there's a worm in the back of your mind just eating at you, going, yeah, this might not work out. We might end up like them. And that is the feeling you get from Chekhov here, where it's like, hey, I don't like the husband, but he might be right. And the wife may be justified, and I don't have answers. And it's a good kind of discomfort, where it's like, it forces you to think. The book we're covering this week, To Kill a Mockingbird, it's not geared for people like Boom and I, it's geared for children. And it treats you as such. It spoon feeds you everything. The Chekhov in particular gives you almost nothing. But the bits it gives you allows you to extrapolate out much further. It allows you to sit there and chew on it, this little 10, 15-page short story, for potentially hours. And I think it's beautiful in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a reading that I was very happy you picked. A lot of thinking got done with that.
Which one did you like more?
I guess I would pick The Witch, just for the reasons that you just kind of said. I really liked Everything Sticks with Him, and or Everything Stuck with Him.
Yeah, one of the two.
Somewhere
around there. It'll show up if you
Stuck and
Google
Stick, but yeah, I really like that. And just almost not quite. I hate to say simplicity when we have this week filming a book that's true in its simplicity. But
Exactly.
it's I do like being given pretty clear-cut assumptions to make, but I've always really enjoyed not getting answers in the books that I'm reading, or to an extent, or being purposely left to ponder. And that The Witch did a great job with that.
See, I'd go with Everything Stuck to Him, but it's partially for very sentimental reasons.
Okay.
I got into Raymond Carver because I was reading in a textbook because I was bored. In a regular high school English class in my junior year with a man by the name of Mr. Rotar. And he was talking about like grain elevators or something. And I was so bored, I stuck to reading the textbook. And I found Everything Stuck to Him. I read it in its entirety, and I fell in love. I've been a big fan of Raymond Carver ever since. And it's not fair to Chekhov for me not to think of them on their own merits. And the sense of the suspense and the way it forces you to ruminate on the themes of it, I'd go with the Chekhov. But the one I'm going to read again, for sure, is going to be Everything Stuck to Him. Which, my mistake, I was looking at the table of contents for where I'm calling from. It's not in this collection. It's actually in what we talk about when we talk about love.
Okay.
But of course, you can find both of these for free online at your leisure. They're incredibly available. And in conclusion, would you recommend these?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would recommend both. Fairly strongly, even. I mean, I don't know if this is in all cases for people who haven't read tons of short stories, but I would almost say, especially if you haven't, especially Everything Stuck with Him, because that's one where I feel like you could go in. That was the one I started with.
Yeah.
And I was able to go in fairly dry in the subject matter, and was a good kind of like getting my feet wet for pulling meaning from text.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Carver, and I started with Chekhov because he influenced Carver. And I feel like if you're a person who values strong character moments, subtlety, and suspense, and if slice of life is a genre that speaks to you at all, these two are absolutely must read, 100%. And on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. I've been Spice.
I've been Boom.
And you've been advised.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next short story episode.